Hello and a wonderful, warm welcome to each and every one of you. It is truly a pleasure to have you here. Wherever you are in the world, whatever your day has been like, I hope this moment finds you feeling healthy, positive, and surrounded by good things. In a time where we often rush from one thing to the next, I want to take a second to just send out a sincere wish for your continued well-being for both you and your loved ones. May you always have strength, vitality, and peace. Thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time with me. Today, we're going to talk about something sweet, something magical, and something that seems to defy the very laws of nature. We're going to explore one of the most incredible facts about one of the most beloved foods in human history, honey. Specifically, the mind-blowing truth that honey never spoils. Archaeologists have discovered pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are over 3,000 years old, and guess what? That honey was still perfectly edible. Not just recognizable as honey, but actually safe to eat. This isn't a myth, it's a scientific reality. So, let's dive deep into the golden, sticky, and absolutely fascinating world of honey to understand how this is even possible. To truly appreciate why honey has this eternal shelf life, we need to start at the very beginning, with the incredible creators of this substance, the honeybees. Honey isn't just something bees collect, it's something they meticulously manufacture. The process begins when worker bees fly from flower to flower, collecting a sweet liquid called nectar. Nectar is essentially a sugar solution produced by flowers to attract pollinators like bees. It's mostly water, with a mix of different sugars like sucrose, glucose, and fructose. A single bee will visit hundreds, even thousands, of flowers to fill her special stomach, known as a honey stomach. This isn't her regular stomach for digesting her own food. It's a separate sac designed just for transporting nectar. Once her honey stomach is full, she flies back to the hive. This is where the real magic begins. Inside the hive, she passes the nectar to another worker bee through a process called trophallaxis, which is basically mouth-to-mouth transfer. This younger house bee takes the nectar and begins to process it. She adds special enzymes from her own body to the nectar. One of the most important enzymes is called invertase. This enzyme breaks down the complex sucrose molecules in the nectar into two simpler sugars, glucose and fructose. This is a crucial first step in the transformation. The bee then deposits this enzyme-rich nectar into one of the hexagonal wax cells of the honeycomb. But at this point, it's still very watery. It's not honey yet. It has far too much water content to be stable. So, the bees have to work on removing most of that water. They do this by fanning their wings vigorously over the honeycomb cells. This constant fanning creates an air current across the open cells, which dramatically increases the evaporation of the water from the nectar. It's a natural dehydration process. The bees work tirelessly, passing the partially dehydrated nectar from bee to bee and from cell to cell, each time adding more enzymes and reducing the water content further. Another key enzyme added during this process is called glucose oxidase. This enzyme plays a pivotal role in honey's future stability. When the bees finally decide the transformation is complete and the water content is low enough, they cap off the cell with a wax seal. Inside that sealed cell, the magic continues and the substance is now what we know as honey. This entire process, from flower to sealed cell, is a masterpiece of natural engineering, and every step contributes to honey's incredible longevity. Now let's get into the specific scientific reasons why honey, once made, becomes virtually immortal. It's a combination of several powerful factors working in perfect harmony. The first and perhaps most important factor is the very low water content. Remember, the bees worked hard to evaporate all that water. Finished honey has a water content of about 17 to 18%. This is extremely low. Why does this matter? Well, most microorganisms that cause food to spoil, like bacteria and fungi, need water to live and grow. They need a moist environment to thrive. They absorb water and nutrients to reproduce. Honey's low water content creates a hostile environment for these spoilage organisms through a concept called water activity. Water activity is a measure of how available the water in a substance is for microorganisms to use. Pure water has a water activity of 1.0. Most bacteria require a water activity of at least 0.91 to grow, and most molds require at least 0.8. Honey has a water activity of around 0.6. This is so low that it is physically impossible for nearly all known bacteria and fungi to absorb any water from it. They simply cannot survive. They dehydrate and die. So, the first line of defense is simple. Honey is too dry for germs to live in. The second major factor is the high sugar concentration. Honey is, for all intents and purposes, a supersaturated sugar solution. It is overwhelmingly composed of sugars, primarily fructose and glucose. This incredibly high sugar concentration creates what is known as an osmotic effect. In simple terms, osmosis is the movement of water across a membrane from an area of low solute concentration, like inside a bacterial cell, to an area of high solute concentration, the thick, sugary honey. If a bacterial cell somehow found itself in honey, the opposite of what it needs would happen. Instead of water flowing into the bacterial cell, water would be violently sucked out of the cell and into the honey. The high sugar concentration acts like a sponge, pulling the water straight out of any microbial cell, causing it to shrivel up and die in a process called plasmolysis. So, between the lack of available water and the osmotic pressure pulling water out of cells, honey is a double whammy of protection against microbial growth. The third critical factor is acidity, or pH. Honey is naturally quite acidic. Its pH typically falls between 3 and 4.5, which is about the same acidity as orange juice or a tomato. This acidic environment is another powerful barrier against spoilage. Many harmful microorganisms prefer a neutral pH to grow. The acidity in honey directly inhibits the growth of any bacteria or molds that might otherwise find a way to survive. This acidity comes from the floral source of the nectar, but also from those special enzymes the bees added. Remember the enzyme glucose oxidase? This is where it becomes a superstar. This enzyme, added by the bee during the ripening process, slowly and continuously converts small amounts of glucose in the honey into gluconic acid and hydrogen peroxide. Yes, you heard that right. Hydrogen peroxide. This is the fourth and perhaps most ingenious weapon in honey's antimicrobial arsenal. The gluconic acid contributes to the overall low pH, making the honey more acidic. But the hydrogen peroxide is a very well-known, powerful natural antiseptic. It is the same stuff you might use to clean a cut. This slow, constant, tiny production of hydrogen peroxide inside the honey provides a continuous and gentle antimicrobial action, killing any potential spoilage organisms that might dare to contaminate it. It's a built-in, self-preserving defense system. It's important to note that this hydrogen peroxide production is kept in check by the other properties of honey. It's produced in low, steady levels that are effective against microbes but harmless to humans. If it were produced too quickly or in too high a concentration, it could potentially damage the honey itself, but the low water activity and acidity prevent that from happening. It's a perfectly balanced system. So, we have these four powerful preservative forces all working together: low water content, high sugar concentration, low pH, acidity, and a slow release of hydrogen peroxide. This combination is so effective that it makes honey one of the only foods in the world that naturally resists spoilage indefinitely, all on its own. It doesn't need pasteurization, refrigeration, canning, or chemical preservatives. It preserves itself. This is why archaeologists exploring ancient Egyptian tombs, like the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun, made that astonishing discovery. They found sealed clay pots that still contained honey. This honey was over 3,000 years old. And because of these perfect natural preservative qualities, it had not rotted, molded, or fermented. It had crystallized and darkened in color, which is a natural process for old honey, but it was still chemically stable and safe for consumption. Of course, modern archaeologists wouldn't just take a spoonful of it. They treat it as a precious artifact, but the point is, from a scientific standpoint, it was still edible. It had not spoiled. The bees, thousands of years ago, had done their job so perfectly that their product was still intact millennia later. This incredible stability is also the reason honey has been used for millennia not just as a food, but as a medicine and a preservative. Ancient civilizations, from the Egyptians to the Greeks and Romans, understood honey's special properties. They used it to treat wounds, believing it could prevent infection. We now know the science behind this: the hydrogen peroxide production, the osmotic effect that draws fluid out of a wound, and the acidic pH all create a perfect environment to inhibit bacterial growth and promote healing. They also used honey to preserve other things. There are historical accounts of ancient armies using honey to preserve fruits and even meat on long journeys. They would pack the food in honey, creating a sterile, anaerobic environment that prevented decay. Embalmers in ancient Egypt used honey in the mummification process to help preserve the bodies of the elite. This long history of use is a testament to humanity's long-standing, intuitive understanding of honey's unique and powerful properties. Now, you might be wondering about the honey you have in your own cupboard. Sometimes, honey can crystallize or become grainy. This is not a sign of spoilage. It is a completely natural process. It happens because honey is a supersaturated solution, meaning it contains more sugar than the water can normally hold. Over time, the glucose molecules will naturally separate from the water and form tiny crystals. The honey becomes thick and solid. This process is influenced by factors like the temperature it's stored at and the specific floral source of the honey. Some honeys, like those from clover or rapeseed, crystallize very quickly. Others, like acacia honey, crystallize very slowly. If your honey crystallizes, it is not bad. It has not gone off. In fact, it's a sign of pure, raw honey. You can easily return it to its liquid state by gently warming the jar in a pot of warm water. The key word is warm, not hot. You don't want to boil it or overheat it, as that can damage some of its delicate enzymes and flavors. So, crystallization is just a physical change, not a chemical one. The honey is still perfectly good and still possesses all of its immortal qualities. The only way honey can ever go bad is if it is contaminated by an external source. If you introduce water into the honey, you can upset its delicate balance. For example, if you dip a wet spoon into the honey jar, you can transfer water and potentially yeast spores into the honey. If enough water is added, it can raise the water activity level high enough that fermentation can occur. The natural yeasts present in the environment can start to ferment the sugars, turning the honey into alcohol and eventually vinegar. This is how the ancient alcoholic drink mead is made, by deliberately diluting honey with water and allowing it to ferment. But for honey stored properly in a sealed container, with no introduction of moisture, this simply will not happen. Its chemical fortress is too strong. So, the next time you see a jar of honey, I hope you see it for what it truly is, a timeless marvel of nature. It is the product of millions of years of evolution, perfected by the honeybee and harnessed by humanity for thousands of years. It is a food that exists outside of time, a sweet reminder of the incredible ingenuity of the natural world. Its eternal nature is a beautiful confluence of biology, chemistry, and physics, all working in perfect sync. From the flower to the bee to the hive to your table, it is a journey of transformation that results in a substance that is, for all practical purposes, forever. It connects us to the ancient Egyptians, to beekeepers throughout history, and to the fundamental processes of life on Earth. It is a gift, truly. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the science of honey. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.